Welcome. Today we will explore Vipassana on the mind, or mindfulness of the mind, the third foundation of mindfulness in the Satipatthana Sutta. So initially I will cover some brief philosophical background, and also relating to some of my personal practice where I find it really useful, this mindfulness of the mind uh, being so beneficial in daily life. And then we will go through a guided meditation, and throughout this video we'll keep it very beginner friendly, we'll keep it very simple. And yes, hello from Thailand. This is beautiful Wat Sofaram International Vipassana Meditation Center, and big thank you to Ajahn Putta for allowing me to stay here and teach. Okay, so let's explore this Vipassana on the mind. Mind really, I feel it's really the secret key of all of our happiness and misery. So once we understand the mind, what it is, how it functions, how it conditions all of our experience, be it within ourselves or in context of other people, I feel, yeah, that's really the end of all the unhappiness. And I feel the point of Vipassana is ending the root causes of unhappiness. I personally find this practice very fruitful. And of course, being a more of a logical thinker coming from the West, having a bit of critical thinking abilities and that type of mind. So yeah, again, I find this practice very useful. And here, a lot of my practice has been influenced by my wonderful teacher in Myanmar, Sayadaw Tejaniya. Now, also, a couple of things I'd like to clarify in the beginning. So the whole point of mind here, and by the way, when we say mind here, we don't mean mind in a small definition like in the West we think about, like brain. Mind is a very wide and diverse, including even consciousness, perception, all of our conditioning. Uh, yeah, so it's quite a broad definition of mind, so we know what we are looking at. And also, sometimes people think of mindfulness of the mind as just being aware of the thoughts or watching the thoughts. Um, Actually, what is much more accurate, I feel, is perhaps looking at one step underneath. So, not just a thought, because thoughts are at surface level, but underneath the thought, what is the state of mind, or what is a mental quality? Or the Buddha describes three main defilements, which are craving or lobha, aversion, resistance, anger, whichever translation you use, which is dosa, and the final one, the ultimate one, is delusion or moha. We think we know, but we actually don't know the ultimate reality or who we are. So the point of Vipassana meditation is, of course, removing these three root causes of unhappiness or unfulfillment, which is what would then lead us to, Buddha doesn't say what it is, but whether you call it enlightenment or highest happiness or ultimate fulfillment. So this practice is a very direct practice, because we will, as we start to observe the mind directly, we start to notice, whenever there is anger present, any resistance present, whenever there is craving present, or we are just not aware. This is, I find, a very direct practice. And that again leads us to the three universal characteristics of all of the conditioned world. which is the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness of all the conditioned phenomena, and non-self, no individual I, so to speak, or no individual you. So this is what it leads us to physically experience. And again, I find in this particular foundation, I can very clearly notice the impermanence. It's really interesting because typically, we have certain thought coming in mind, like input a stimulus, and boom, we directly believe it and we act upon it. So stimulus and reaction is boom. But with this particular practice, the stimulus, which for me I often notice in the form of thought, it's like, when the thought comes in, I actually become aware. There is a thought. And this is the mind state. The thought is motivated by either craving or maybe not craving, by a wholesome mental state or an unwholesome mental state. So with this practice, we really create that space between a stimulus, and then in this space, it's like, let me decide, is this skillful mental state or not? Is the thought motivated by what? And then if it is skillful, wholesome, okay, act upon it. Otherwise, just observe it. And it's really interesting, just by doing nothing, by just observing from a little bit of distance. It's like, wow, thought just fades away. And saves me so much of misery from some unskillful action, speech, etc. So yes, this is where I find this practice very worthwhile. And to keep it simple, in the original discourse, Buddha does give a fair bit of detail, but to keep it very beginner friendly, what we will do, especially if you're very new to the practice and when you want to start practicing it, you could just make it very simple two-step process. We'll sit down and just start with noticing that there is awareness. So you become aware that you are aware. So I could use a simple labeling technique if I was quite a beginner. It's like right now there is awareness, awareness. Whenever the thought comes up, then I just simply label a thought, like thinking, 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 without going into the story of the thinking or the details or the content. It's like, okay, thinking, thinking, thinking. And then whenever thinking passes away, just coming back, awareness, awareness, awareness. Thinking, thinking, or some feeling comes up of anger or whatever, or some craving, just noticing that. But most of the time, thinking and awareness. I found that was a very good first step in my practice. And then we move into the second step, which is much more in line with the Satipatthana Sutta, the instructions of the Buddha. Is Again, we'll keep it fairly simple. So we will look at the presence or absence of four different states, the four more basic states here. So we notice whenever craving comes up, we notice craving, craving arising, craving coming in. And then whenever it passes away, we notice that and label that as well, craving going away. Similarly, resistance or anger coming in, okay, anger, anger, and then anger going away. And delusion, in a simplest way, how do we recognize it? When we forget to be mindful, when we forget to be aware, we could just label that as delusion. And when we become aware, it's like, okay, letting go of that. And the fourth one we will also utilize when the mind state is concentrated or distracted. So either ways, now this is again the important thing. We actually have no preference towards, whether there is anger coming in or anger going away. We have no preference towards the mind is concentrated or distracted. Our only job is just to be a detached observer, like a scientist, just collecting data. Okay, right now it's this way, right now it's that way. This is what, by having no preference or no expectations, this is what really allows for the wisdom to come through. And we really start to see almost the no self nature. So in the second part, we will also explore some inquiry, whether is it really you, is it really I that generates these mental states, and all these patterns or quality, or does this just happen automatically as some part of some natural process? So which will again lead us towards a experiencing of non-self. Okay, and of course, in terms of unsatisfactoriness or unhappiness, we will very clearly notice whenever there is craving present or anger present, we will be able to clearly notice how it actually produces unhappiness or suffering. This is how we realize these three characteristics directly in this practice. Okay, now let's get into a practice. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat, keeping your back fairly straight and still being physically fairly relaxed. Feel free to close your eyes. And you may just start with the first step. Okay, awareness. So awareness is here. And if there is thinking, 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 thinking going away. Okay, back to awareness, awareness. It's just a little step one as a warm-up, if you like. And then we move into the actual practice of Vipassana on the mind. And let's start to notice what is the state of mind. What is the most noticeable state? What is the most outstanding state? You may notice there is a sense of craving coming in, or maybe resistance, aversion coming in. Notice that. Notice the arising of it, the start of it. Allow it to stay for as long as it stays. And just notice whenever it passes away. Notice that. Recognize it. Craving passing away. Or aversion, resistance, anger passing away. Similarly, if you see the mind is distracted, just notice that and label it distracted. And at some point, that might go away as well. Notice that too. Each arising and each passing away. Keep on labeling it. If you forget to be aware, then it's just simply moha or delusion. And sometimes if you notice no outstanding mind state or no presence of a defilement, nothing else is noticeable, then I just simply use an anchor word as awareness. Awareness. Until something else becomes noticeable. And then I acknowledge that, label that. So please continue for a few minutes in a relaxed manner and with a sense of interest and curiosity in learning about the mind. Please continue. each arising of craving, anger, delusion, and passing away of it. And if you notice some intense feeling, then I invite you to just really zoom in, become very curious. How does this anger work, for example? Let me see. Let me understand this. The attitude is not, motivation is not to push it away. Just acknowledging it, and seeing maybe the changing nature of it. See what you can learn here. And you may even choose to inquire, practice a self-inquiry, so to speak. Like, oh, who chose to be angry? Was it really me? Did I choose to do this? And how did it just happen suddenly out of nowhere? And if I can notice this anger, then is this anger really me? Is this even mine? In this inquiry process, in Dhamma Vichaya, in Pali as we call it, your only job is just to plant the question. We don't need to intellectually think through the answer, but just planting the question, and then your wisdom muscle to work on it automatically. And whenever all the causes have been met, the insight, the wisdom will just appear for you. Sometimes you might even be in the middle of a shower and it might come through. Wonderful. Okay, so that was a little guided practice. And you will be surprised as this practice develops more and more that how these thoughts just come, and if we do nothing and just observe it, how they just pass away so quickly. So where this becomes very useful for me in daily life is realizing how often I'm really acting out of craving or aversion or resistance towards something, and then just stopping for a moment and realize, I catch my mind in sort of inaction live, and it's like, hang on, this is unskillful, I don't want to follow it. Or sometimes when I see another person acting from an unwholesome mindset, I can kind of see, maybe they are acting from a place of aversion or anger, they're maybe acting from craving or from a place of delusion, they just don't know. So that makes it very easy for me not to give them any advice, but at least to become more understanding, more compassionate. Okay, this is how they are right now. So then I don't take their action too literally. And it makes me then much more peaceful and stay within my wisdom space, so to speak, to see, oh, we all are just acting out of our conditioning. That's why this is such a meaningful process of unconditioning. Okay, thank you everyone. Hope you enjoyed this practice. Please try it out in your daily life, on the cushion or off the cushion. And any questions, any suggestions, please post them here. Thank you everyone. May we all be peaceful.